Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So the political challenges facing Theresa May are stacking up. As well as negotiating Britain's exit from the EU, the Prime Minister must now deal with the SNP demands for a second referendum on Scottish independence, with backbenchers agitating against cuts to school budgets, and a humiliated Chancellor forced to U-turn on a key budget measure just 1 week after announcing it. Here's Adam Fleming on a turbulent political week for Prime Minister May.
Monday, 11:30 a.m. TV crews gather in the residence of the First Minister of Scotland, who's got a surprise. She wants a vote on whether Scotland should leave the UK before the UK leaves the EU.
By taking the steps I have set out today, I am ensuring that Scotland's future will be decided not just by me, the Scottish Government or the SNP. It will be decided by the people of Scotland. It will be Scotland's choice.
Westminster, 6:25, the same day. MPs reject amendments to the legislation authorising the Prime Minister to start Brexit.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 287.
The bill ceremonially heads to the Lords, where peers abandon attempts to change it, and it becomes law.
So the not contents have it.
But Downing Street doesn't trigger Article 50 as many had expected. Some say they were spooked by Nicola Sturgeon. Now it's 11:38, Wednesday, our office. We get an email from the Treasury cancelling the planned rise in national insurance for the self-employed announced at the budget. It's just minutes before Prime Minister's questions at noon.
The trend towards greater self-employment does create a structural issue in the tax base. We will bring forward further proposals, but we will not bring forward increases to NICs later in this Parliament.
It seems to me like a government in a bit of chaos in here. By making this change today, we are listening to our colleagues and demonstrating our determination to fulfil both the letter and the spirit of our manifesto tax commitments.
Thursday, 0700, Conservative Campaign HQ, and the Electoral Commission finds the party £70,000 for misreporting spending from the last general election. But that's not what the Prime Minister wants to talk about, because at 12:19 she gives her verdict on a Scottish referendum.
We should be working together, not pulling apart. We should be working together to get that right deal for Scotland, that right deal for the UK. So I say that's my job as Prime Minister. And so for that reason, I say to the SNP, now is not the time.
Friday, and time for the faithful to gather. SNP activists at their spring conference in Aberdeen. Conservatives in Cardiff to hear the Prime Minister promote her plan for a more meritocratic Brexit Britain. At 11:10 comes some news about a newspaper that's frankly flabbergasting.
I'm thrilled and excited to be the new editor of the Evening Standard. And, you know, with so many big issues in our world, what people want are authoritative facts, good analysis, great news journalism. It's a really important time for good journalism, and the Evening Standard is going to provide it.
Please welcome Gordon Brown.
There was no let-up yesterday as Gordon Brown launched proposals for a federal UK.
Under my proposals, we keep the Barnett formula, we keep the fiscal transfers, but we also bring the powers to deal with agriculture and fisheries back to the Scottish Parliament.
And just think, all this, and we're still counting down to the actual start of the Brexit process.
Adam Fleming there. What a week in politics, Isabel. A torrid week for the government. But does Mrs May shake it off, or is this a sign of worse to come?
Well, we may all be feeling a little bit breathless after the events of last week, and I think we are in for a long war of attrition now with the SNP. I think that Nicola Sturgeon's strategy will be to foster over lengthy periods of time as much resentment and anger as she can in Scotland and try to create the impression that independence is somehow inevitable.
Is Scotland the biggest challenge for Mrs May in the next year or so?
I think it probably is, because you look at how relatively easily the Brexit bill went through on an issue where people could hardly feel more passionate in the Commons, and actually despite all the potential drama, it's gone through quite smoothly. I think, to go back to your original question, she just carries on. Don't underestimate the basic quiet goodwill towards Theresa May amongst the majority of Tory backbenchers. Yes, there are difficult little issues over school funding. I'm sorry, it's not a little issue, it's a big one. She'll get over that. Treat each thing as it comes and she will keep pressing on.
Has she not called Nicola Sturgeon's bluff in that the First Minister said, I want a referendum, here's roughly when I want it. The Prime Minister says, you're not having one. What happens next?
Well, she has, and she's done it quite well. In fact, the progress Theresa May made this week in frustrating Nicola Sturgeon was evident when Nicola Sturgeon said yesterday, oh, OK, then maybe we can talk about the timing after all. So Nicola Sturgeon has already been the first one to blink. But I'd slightly disagree with Isabel there. I don't think Scotland is going to be the biggest hurdle for her. What this week really showed us was Theresa May, it was a reality bites week. Theresa May is juggling 4 mammoth crises at the same time. Brexit, obviously, which I think is still going to be the biggest challenge, trying to get a good deal. Then you've got Trump left field, who popped up and insulted GCHQ on Friday out of the blue. Then, of course, Scotland. And the fiscal challenge, which is this sort of enormous, great problem, how to fill the budget holes. And it really reinforced the point, this is not
well, it's only £2 billion the budget hole. Over 4 years.
But that was just one small problem, one immediate problem, how to fill this huge social care crisis and the ageing demographic, etc. So this is not normal times in British politics. Theresa May has not got a normal workload on her plate, and hence why I think we'll see more mistakes made as the time goes on, as she has this almost impossible workload to try and juggle.
How tempted do you think the Prime Minister is to call an early election? There's more chatter about it now. Is she tempted, and if she is, will she succumb?
I'll answer that in a second, as Harold Wilson used to say. I just want to say I disagree with the rest of the panel about how she has out-manipulated Nicola Sturgeon this week. I think Nicola Sturgeon expected Theresa May to say no to her suggested timetable. It would have been amazing if she had said yes. She expected to say no, but Sturgeon calculates that will fuel support for her cause.
There's no sign of that.
Well, not at the moment.
The latest poll this morning shows 56 to 44 against independence, and only 13% think they would be better off with an independent Scotland, and a clear majority do not want a second referendum.
But the calculation of resistance from Westminster combined with Brexit, which hasn't started yet, I'm just saying that I think this is her calculation. She didn't expect Theresa May to say, yeah, sure, go ahead. I'm sure she expected Theresa May to say, no, you can't have it in your desired timetable. On the wider point, I think Theresa May is in a fascinating position. She is both strong because she faces weak opposition and is ahead in the opinion polls, but faces the most daunting agenda of any Prime Minister for 40 or 50 years, I think. So it's a weird combination. I don't think she wants to call an election. I don't think she's thought about how you would manipulate it, what the trigger would be, and whether she's got the energy and space to prepare for and then mount a campaign whilst beginning the Brexit negotiation. Now there is, you can see the cause would be the small majority is going to make her life hellish, which it will do. Whether a landslide would help is another question. They can be difficult too. But I think the problems outweigh the advantages of going early.
Do you think she'll go for an early election?
I don't, and I think you have to look at the rhetoric coming out of Number 10, which is so firm on this question. It is, of course, a delicious prospect for us commentators to think there might be an election around the corner, but they are so firm on this, I can't see it happening.
Tom?
I agree. We are in unanimous agreement on this one alone. It's superficially very attractive because, of course, she'd love a bigger majority and she'd get a lot more through Parliament, especially Brexit. The nitty-gritty of it makes an early general election, certainly this year, almost impossible. How do you write a manifesto on hard Brexit versus soft Brexit? Opens up another Pandora's box of problems.
Adds to the uncertainty, and there's enough from the European elections.
Well, exactly, and the EU say, hang on a minute, are we negotiating with you or the person who may replace you? Plus, how do you keep the Tory party united going into an election? How do you even call one with a vote of no confidence in yourself? You may end up losing. Easy on paper, incredibly difficult in practice.
Okay, we shall see. Because if Theresa May did go for an early election this spring, is Labour ready for one? The party's campaigns and elections chief, Andrew Gwynn, joins me live from Salford. Andrew Gwynn, the government, as we've just been talking about, they executed one of the most embarrassing U-turns in recent history this week. It's been a torrid time for the May government. So why are the Tories still so chipper?
Well, look, the Labour Party has been on an early election footing since before Christmas, and we are preparing ourselves for that eventuality in case that does come. And that means that we've got to get ourselves into a position whereby we can not only challenge the government, but we can also offer a valuable alternative for the British people to choose from should that election arise.
So would you welcome an early general election?
Well, of course, I don't want this government to be in power. So, of course, if there's an opportunity to put a case to the British people as to why there is a better way, and I believe the Labour way is the better way, then, of course, we would want to put that case to the country.
So would Labour vote in the Commons for an early election?
Well, of course, as an opposition, not wanting to be in opposition, wanting to be in government, should the government put forward a measure in accordance with the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, then that's something we would very seriously have to consider. Because
well, yeah, I know you'd have to consider it, but would you vote for an early election or not?
Well, of course, we want to be the government. So if the current government puts forward measures to bring forward a general election, we would want to put our case to the British public. And that's one of the jobs that I've been given, is to get the Labour Party organisationally into a position where we can fight a general election.
So just for the avoidance of doubt on this then, if the government was to issue a motion in the Commons for an early election, the Labour Party would vote for an early election?
Well, it would be very difficult not to, Andrew, because if the government wants to dissolve Parliament, wants a general election, we don't want the Tories to be in government. We want to be in government. We want to have that opportunity to put that case to the British people.
Are you ready for an early election? You say you've been on a war footing since the Labour conference last autumn. I mean, but are you ready for one? How big is the election fighting fund?
Well, we have got substantial amounts of money in our fighting fund. That is true, because not only has the Labour Party managed to eliminate its own financial deficit that it inherited from previous election campaigns, we have also managed to build up a substantial fund in the off chance that we have an election. We've also expanded massively our operations at Labour HQ. We are taking on additional staff, and one of the jobs that myself and Ian Lavery, who I job share with, are currently doing is to go around the Parliamentary Labour Party to make sure that Labour colleagues have the support and the resources that they need should they have to face the electorate in their constituencies.
All right, so you're on a war footing, you're ready for the fight, you say you vote for the fight. So have you got your tax and spend policies ready to roll out?
Well, that's something that obviously the Shadow Treasury team will be discussing. Of course, one of the things is if there is an early general election, the normal timetable for these things kind of gets fast-tracked, because our policy decision-making body is annual conference. We have the National Policy Forum that creates policy
But you've been on a war
suggestions.
footing since the last Labour conference. That's what Mr Corbyn told us. So you must have a fair idea of what policies you would fight an early election on. So how much extra per year would you spend on the NHS?
Well, look, our policies, I'm not going to set out the Labour manifesto for an election that hasn't been called.
No, I'm just asking about the NHS. You must have a policy for that.
We have a policy for the NHS.
So how much extra?
But Andrew, I am not going to set out Labour's tax and spend policies here on the Sunday Politics when there hasn't even been an election called.
But you said you've been on a war footing, and you're prepared to vote for one. So if you can't tell me that, could you tell me what the corporation rate tax, the tax on company profits, would be under a Labour government?
you'll have to be patient, Andrew, and wait for Mrs May to trigger an early general election. If there's going to be an election on the 4th of May, then the writ has to be issued on the 27th of March. So that's not long to wait. Now, if that date passes, we aren't having an election on the 4th of May, and the normal timetable for policy development will continue.
All right. You lost Copeland. I think you were in charge of that by-election for Labour. Your national poll ratings are still dire, even after this week of terrible times for the Tories. Sometimes you even lose local government by-elections in safe seats, including in the place you are now in Salford. So how long does Mr Corbyn have to turn this around?
Well, look, the issue of the Labour leadership was settled last year. The last thing that the Labour Party now needs is another period of introspection where the Labour Party merely talks to the Labour Party. We're now on an election footing in case Mrs May does trigger an early general election. We need to be talking to the British people, not to ourselves. And so any speculation about the Labour leadership might excite you in the media, but actually for us in the Labour Party, it's about re-engaging and reconnecting with the voters.
Well, rather than being excited, I feel quite daunted at the prospect of an early election, so I wouldn't get that right. But normally, given the number of mistakes this government has made and its midterm, you would expect any self-respecting opposition to be about 10 points ahead. On the latest polls out this morning, you're 17 behind. There's a 27 to 30 point gap from where you should normally be as an opposition. Are you telling me that if that doesn't change, you still fight the next election with Mr Corbyn?
Look, these are matters for the future. I believe that the leadership issue was settled last year.
No,
we've had two leadership contests in 2 years.
Would you seriously contemplate going into the next election, whether it's look, if it's early, I perfectly understand Mr Corbyn is your man. But if it's not till 2020 and you're still 17, 18 points behind in the polls, are you going to go into the next election like that?
Well, there's a lot of future looking and speculation there. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where the Labour Party will be in 12 months' time, let alone by 2020. So let's cross those bridges when we come to it. My main challenge is to make sure that the Labour Party is in the best possible place organisationally to fight an election. That's my challenge, and I'm up for that, to make sure that we are in the best possible place to ensure that Labour returns as many Labour MPs at the next general election as possible.
That's your job. We wouldn't expect anything else. Mr Gwynne, thank you for joining us. We're joined now from the Liberal Democrat Spring Conference in York by the former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg. Good morning, Nick Clegg. In his conference speech today, Tim Farron lumps Theresa May with Vladimir Putin, Marine Le Pen and Donald Trump. In what way is Mrs May similar to Marine Le Pen?
Well, Tim, of course, is not saying that Theresa May is identical to Marine Le Pen. I think what Tim is going to spell out to us shortly in his speech is that we need to be aware of what's going on in the world, that the international settlement, if you like, which was arrived at after the Second World War, which bound nations, particularly powerful nations, by the international rule of law, multilateral institutions, supranational organisations, is under attack from characters as diverse as Vladimir Putin, Marine Le Pen and Donald Trump, and that by siding so sort of ostentatiously with Donald Trump and pursuing this very hard Brexit, Theresa May appears to be giving succour to that much more sort of isolationist, chauvinist view of the world than the multilateral approach which Britain has subscribed to for a very long time.
But in what way? I mean, the exact words he plans to use are welcome to the New World Order, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Marine Le Pen, Theresa May, aggressive, nationalistic, anti-NATO, anti-EU. In what way is Mrs May fitting in to any of that? In what way is she similar to Vladimir Putin? I mean, I'm not aware she's invaded anywhere recently or interfered with other people's elections.
Yeah. So, well, I think the clue is in the quote you just read out, which is that the world order, certainly since over the last half century or more, by the way, a lesson I'm afraid we had to learn in Europe because of the terrible bloodshed of 2 world wars in the space of a few decades, was based on the idea that might is not right, that big countries, strong-armed leaders can't just throw their weight around. And what we now have with Erdogan, Putin, the kind of populism across parts of Western Europe, and Donald Trump, who personally thinks that NATO is obsolete, personally thinks that the EU is going to unravel, is a shift to a different, a radically different view of the world. And
Mrs. May doesn't think any of that.
To challenge that.
Mrs. May is not anti-NATO. She's not anti-EU. She said she wants the EU to succeed. She's not aggressive as far as I'm aware. So I don't understand why you would lump the British Prime Minister in with these other characters.
Well, let me explain. Because by pursuing, and this is her choice, a much, much harder, uncompromising approach to Brexit than she could have done. Clearly, in doing so, she, in my view, maybe not yours or shared by others, is pursuing a self-harming approach for the United Kingdom, but also very much tugging and pulling at the threads that bind the rest of the European Union together. In so ostentatiously siding with Donald Trump in that visit of hers recently to the White House, somehow declaring, in my view, speciously, that we can make up for the trade that we're going to lose in the European Union through new trade agreements with the United States. She's not rejecting and challenging this shift towards a much more chauvinist approach to world affairs that is happening in many, many places.
Now, you're at your party's spring conference. I think we could both agree that any Lib Dem comeback is going to take a long time. Would Tory dominance be more quickly and effectively challenged by a realignment of the centre and the centre-left? And are you working towards that?
Sorry, I missed half the question, but I think you're talking about a realignment.
Yes,
my own view
as a
is
quicker way to to get over Tory dominance. Would you want that to happen? Are you working towards that?
Look, my own view is that the recovery of the Liberal Democrats will be a little quicker than you suggest. I mean, people often forget, by the way, that even the nadir of our fortunes, the low point of our fortunes in the last election, we still got 1 million more votes than the SNP. It's only because we've got this crazy electoral system that gives them 56 seats and us 8, even though they got 1 million fewer votes.
Yeah, but the SNP only fight in Scotland.
Yeah, sure, no, I'm just making a point.
You
that
fight in the whole country.
Well, I'm saying that the way in which seats are, of course, allocated in Parliament perhaps overlooks the fact that even in the low point of our fortunes, 2.5 million people still voted for us.
Anyway, realignment.
My own view is, of course, there are a lot of people who are feeling increasingly homeless in the sort of liberal wing of the Conservative Party because they now are in a party which is in effect indistinguishable from a UKIP on some of the biggest issues of the day, and clearly there are a lot of homeless folk on the kind of more rational, reasonable wing of the Labour Party. I would invite them to join the Liberal Democrats. I would also invite all of us across parties to talk about the ideas that bind us, because my own view is that the Westminster Village you lose a huge amount of sleep and invest a lot of energy building new castles in the sky, inventing new names for new parties, when actually what you want is for people on the progressive centre ground of British politics to talk to each other across party divisions about the ideas that unite them, on the dilemmas from artificial intelligence to an ageing population, from Brexit to climate change, to which we need to find more compelling answers.
Do you think, in your own view, can Brexit still be thwarted, or is it now a matter of getting the best terms?
I think we're in a sort of, how can I put it, we're in an interlude, almost a calm between two storms, the storm of the referendum itself and the collision between the government's stated ambitions for Brexit and the reality of actually having to negotiate something workable with 27 other governments and parliaments. My crystal ball is no clearer than yours. The one thing I can guarantee you is that what the government has promised to the British people cannot happen, because they haven't, by the way, said, oh, we will negotiate the terms of Article 15, namely the divorce from the European Union in the next 2 years, and then over a slower period of time we'll work out what our new relationship is with the European Union. Theresa May has said she will settle the divorce arrangements, money, pensions and so on, negotiate a new trade agreement, negotiate new crime-fighting arrangements, negotiate new climate change policies and so on with the European Union, and have that all ratified within 2 years. That is not going to happen. So I think there's going to be quite a lot of turbulence in the next couple of years.
But will you try to thwart it? Will you use this turbulence, as you call it, to try and thwart Brexit, to find a way of rolling back the decision?
It's not about repeating the debates of the past or thwarting the will of the people. It is, however, comparing what people have been promised, from the £350 million for the NHS every week, through to this glittering array of new trade agreements that apparently we're going to sign up to around the world, and a complete change in the way in which people come in and out of this country, with the reality that will transpire in the next couple of years.
Okay.
And at that point, yes, it is my belief that people should be able to take a second look at whether that's what they really wanted.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Just a couple of very quick questions there. Would you welcome an early general election?
Oh, I always welcome an early. I think we couldn't do much worse than we did last time, so yes, of course I would welcome it.
Well, that's probably true. You've got a column in the Evening Standard. Have you spoken to the new editor yet as to whether he's going to keep your column or spike it?
No, I haven't. I wait in nervous anticipation.
I bet the phone may be ringing now, but just before you go, do you think, can you be a newspaper editor in the morning and an MP in the afternoon?
Do I think that's feasible? Sorry, I missed you a bit. Look. There's no prohibition. There's no sort of law against MPs being editors. There have been in the past, and no doubt will again in the future. He's taking a lot on. He's not only wanting to be an editor, he's also wanting to, as you know, continue to be an MP in the north of England, to be a jet-setting academic in the United States, to earn a lot of money in the city. Look, you'll have to ask him and get him on the programme. I suspect something will give. It seems to me, even by George Osborne's self-confident standards in his own abilities, I suspect he's probably taking on a little bit too much.
Very diplomatic, Mr. Clegg. I'm sure you'll get to keep the column. Thanks for joining us from York.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I've been getting away with it.